I found myself imagining this map 4 years ago when I was interviewing for Toyota Motor Asia Pacific in Singapore. But before I go and tell you that story, I'm going to tell you how I got there. So my first dare came long before that, which was to study Japanese. After studying Spanish for 7 years, I came to college and I wanted to study Japanese. Everyone told me you should study Spanish because that's what you're good at. But I didn't want to. So I started studying Japanese, fell in love with it, aced the class, got like 105% like a major dork, and continued to go to every class, every day, loving it until the point that I was ready to study abroad. Now, as a child, I actually came from an Italian family, so it was kind of strange for me to study Japanese. But I always had a fascination with Asia because my mom had grown up there as a child and lived there for 7 years. And my grandmother would always make us take our shoes off at the door. She always had these ornate objects that were some crazy place that I wasn't allowed to touch. And I always had this curiosity for it. So when I started to study Japanese, the next step was study abroad. I was a junior in college, and I started to consider the idea of what if I could pursue my language abilities further and actually study in my host country. So I stayed with a homestay family and fell in love with it more than I could have even imagined. And it became my second family. Outside of school, I engaged with Japanese businessmen. They taught me that when you sit down for a meal, Japanese business people, you have one beer before you start to shochu and whiskey and sake. And I learned how to eat a fish, from the whole fish down to the spine, such as this one, including learning to eat the fish from the eyeball, or the eyeball from the fish, because apparently it was good for the women's skin. So I learned all of these things, and I got back to college, and I started to have this, I finished my semester in Japan, and I was actually offered an internship in Tokyo. So I got this idea of, well, what if I could actually work internationally? Now, normally I don't say this part of the story, but given that this is a female sorority, or a female organization, when I was offered the internship, I mentioned it to my boyfriend at the time. My boyfriend of 3 years. My boyfriend, whom of which I probably could have been proposed and engaged to, and never had ever been in my life. And when I mentioned it to him, he said, no way, you can't take that internship, because if you take that internship, I can't wait for you another 3 months. You've already been gone 5 months. So I freaked out, and I said no to the internship, and I went back to the States. So my idea went over. And I went back to college, a senior in college, and I felt, here I am, resume with all these jobs, I'm almost fluent in Japanese, and I felt valuable, but yet everyone made me feel like the guy in this cartoon. Everyone made me feel like you're a new graduate, you shouldn't be picky, you need to accept whatever job gets to you. You can get, basically. But I thought, no way, I'm much more valuable than that. So I dumped the boyfriend and graduated and got a job, despite it being a good job market in 2007, and started to consider this idea of what if I could actually launch my career internationally. So I did. I bought a one-way ticket to Singapore, gave myself a budget of $2,000 and a time frame of 2 months, and I said, if I don't find a job, I'll just come home. But I had to try. Anyone know where Singapore is? That was to you.
She's like, well, there was someone right behind me, and now Singapore is right here.
Try again. Close. She can help you. You're there, almost.
Is it not right there? It is Malaysia. But sing again. Okay.
Very nice.
Here we go.
Well done. At the tip of Malaysia. Thank you. I love doing that because no one can ever pronounce Singapore. Honestly speaking, I didn't know where Singapore was on the map when I first even considered moving there. So I bought a one-way ticket. It's a pretty cool city, huh? Pretty sweet. And I hit the ground running and started trying to get acclimated with the local culture, both expatriates and the Singaporeans. Joined the American lunches, going to dinners, crashing events that I didn't have tickets to, just trying to get a job. However, you'd never believe how it actually ended up working out. Dare number 4, don't give up. 3 weeks had passed by, and I was running out of money. Everyone was telling me to go home, that my pipe dream of launching my career at AWF was going to fail, and that I tried, and that's all I could do. So I decided to take a break, and I went for a swim. And it was in this pool that I came out of the water, and I saw the most adorable little Japanese boy swimming in front of me in floaties. So I said to him, "Konnichiwa." And he looked back like, who's this white girl trying to speak Japanese to me? And he was with his mother, so we chatted for a few moments, and then from nowhere, out of behind them, came his father. And his father just ends up being the most successful Toyota dealership owner for 10 consecutive years, had already retired and been hired on as a consultant for Toyota in Singapore. He was starting a new department, and there was one position left in the company. So there I was, imagining myself on a world map, in the interview, with 3 big bosses in front of me, 3 general managers, Indian, Thai, and Japanese. And my dream came true. 3 weeks later, I started with Toyota in Singapore. This was my office for Toyota Motor Asia Pacific, an open-air office. We, in this office, managed 14 countries, everyone up to Taiwan, Philippines, Korea, everywhere in the South Pacific, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and then over to India and Pakistan. Anyone guess why my name plate might be pink?
You're a woman?
Yes. Why would they, do you think they would want to identify that as a woman?
Because maybe they weren't familiar with Western names as much, so they wouldn't be able to tell that Hilary is a female name.
Precisely. And in fact, there were 250 people in this office, all from those 14 countries. But I was the only Caucasian and the first American that they'd ever hired. So you're right, and not many people get the answer to that question. So you have names coming from Taiwanese names, Pakistani names, Chinese names, Singaporean names, Malaysian, Vietnamese names. It's very hard to distinguish the gender from the names. That's why you have a picture as well as their color. So 3 months had passed. 3 months had passed, and I was there once again, this time a bit more serious. I was in the first department meeting, and we were in the middle of a discussion on my first project. And the executive vice president entered the room. Suddenly, everyone stood up, because that's what you do when the big bosses enter the room. And he came over directly to me, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "I hope you realize you're the one white face in the company." That was my first reaction. So initially, or at first, I thought, what am I doing here? What was I thinking coming halfway across the world to work for the world's largest car manufacturer as the only Caucasian in the Asia Pacific office? So that was my first reaction. Almost moments, like barely seconds passed. And he's still staring at me. And then I switched and I realized that he wasn't telling me I couldn't do it. He wasn't telling me that I was going to fail, but rather he was telling me I had a challenge in front of me. And that was the point in my career that I made a promise to myself that I would learn from what brought Toyota success, but then at the same time add value to it from the West, from my young woman's perspective. Did you find me?
Back left.
Yeah. So, everyday life in Singapore, what was it, in Singapore, what was it like? My first project was actually based in Philippines. So even though we were in Singapore, I traveled 3 weeks out of every month to the Philippines. So the dealerships of Asia became my workplace. Along with that, the hotels became my home. To the point where some of my coworkers back in Singapore would say that they thought I should rent a hotel in Singapore instead of in the business trip